is discuss a little bit. I want to discuss a little bit the meanings of the Hindu scriptures. So let's start off with the story of the Ramayana. We have Rama and Sita. Rama represents the avatar of Vishnu, so Rama is represents Vishnu is pure awareness, so that's Vishnu means all pervasiveness. So that's a oneness consciousness, right? And he's married to Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. And the idea behind that is if you're in pure awareness, then wealth comes. But the idea is you don't want to be goal-oriented, because if you're goal-oriented, I discovered all this on my own, but if you're goal-oriented and you're trying to get wealth, then that's result orientation. That's idol worship. That's why the Hindus say it's not beneficial to worship Lakshmi. You first worship Vishnu, and then Lakshmi comes. You first focus on the flow, and then wealth, material, is the byproduct of that. So focus on pure awareness, inquiry. It's what Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and then everything else comes unto you. So some people focus first on worship of the goddess, worship of Lakshmi. And yeah, you can get wealth by that, but is it lasting? First, you want to work on expansion of consciousness, pure awareness. Then, in the story, Sita is stolen, but then she comes back to Ram at the end. The idea behind that is that if you're in pure awareness, you might lose wealth, but but it comes back to you. Everything else comes unto you. If you seek first Ram, then Sita comes back. Ravana means roaring. That's the enemy of the Mahabarata or of the Ramayana. And the idea behind Ravana is he's loved by Shiva. And the idea behind this is there is no formula to the flow. Some people can roar, they can have a great level of aliveness, even be destructive, and they can still gain salvation. In the end, he does gain salvation when he's killed by Rama. There is no formula for the flow. So Ravana, he's kind of crazy. He's kind of demonic, and he's extremely passionate, and that's why he's loved by Shiva. So Shiva and Vishnu are one, but Shiva is the more imminent aspect of Vishnu, and Shiva is auspiciousness. That's the idea that the flow comes even through grace, even to people who are sinners, or even to people who are in a material mode of being like Ravana. So that's why you don't want to judge anybody. So I'm going through the ideas. These are ideas I discovered by studying the Hindu scriptures. No one's ever seen this stuff before. So then we have the Mahabarata. What's the meaning of the Mahabarata? That's the Ramayana is one of the Hindu epics. The other one's the Mahabarata. In the Mahabarata, we have Krishna is the avatar of Vishnu, and Krishna in one of the stories, he kills a guy and then he throws the two separate parts of the guy, he rips them apart and throws his parts in two separate sections, but then they come back together, and he throws them apart and they come back together. That's the idea. It's difficult to break out of dualistic ego software, but then he throws them the separate ways and they don't come back together. And that's finally the transcending of the dualism, of the idea of the separate self, of the ego. But Krishna is he takes on the side of the Pandavas. The Pandavas are Arjuna, who is the son of the sky god, of the cloud god, and that's ephemerality. The clouds are not material. The sky is not material. So it represents kind of the flow, although it is still material. So it is not completely the flow. So even Arjuna is submissive to Krishna. Krishna is the flow. That's oneness, pure awareness. And then there's Bhishma. Bhishma represents, as I described, he's the son of the wind god, and the wind represents the breath, and again, that's ephemerality. Then there's the sons of the Ashwins, the gods, the Ashwin gods, which are the gods of the dawn, and again, that even itself is kind of ephemeral. And there's Yudhishthira, who's the son of the god of truth, or the god of death, and they're all on the side of Krishna. But then on the other side is Karna. Karna is the son of the sun god, and throughout the Mahabharata, throughout all the Hindu scriptures, we're going to see a conflict between the sun god and the sky god, and that's the Karna, who's the son of the sun god, and Arjuna, who's the son of the sky god, of the god of the clouds, and that's because the clouds block the sun. So Krishna and Arjuna kill Karna. Karna represents the sun. The sun is very physical, and it represents power, the desire for power, or worship of the sun. It represents pure energy, so it points to the flow, points to Krishna, but it's also not, because it's also based around time, and in the flow there is no time, and there is no thing. But the sun demarcates time. So they kill Karna, who's the son of the sun god, representing time and physicality, because the sun is physical, And then also they kill Duryodhana, who's the avatar of Kali, and Kali represents time and the ego. So, and it's Bhishma, who's the wind god, who kills Kali, and Bhishma, the wind god, represents the breath and also ephemerality, but the breath, that breath is unconscious aspect of the self, something you don't have to think about. You can transcend. It represents a transcendence of the self. The thing about the breath is it can be both voluntary and involuntary. It can be mechanical, which would be calculative thinking, or the flow, where it's involuntary, automatic. And so then we're going to see that conflict between the sun god and the sky god throughout the whole Hindu scriptures. So there's one story in the Hindu scriptures, in the Vishnu Purana, or the Shiva Purana, where they're worshiping the sun god, and but then they break out of that because there's a sun god worshippers, and then they lose a horse because the sun god worshippers, again, they want power, right? And that's the idea behind worshiping the sun. And then the horse, wherever the horse goes, they have to conquer that kingdom. But so the horse is going around, but then the horse gets stuck with a sage, and then the sun god worshippers go to the sage, and they think the sage stole the horse, so they start throwing rocks at him. But then the sage burns them with his eyes. He burns them with fire, and they turn to ashes. And but then the descendants of those sun god worshippers, they pray for the Ganges River to come and baptize the people who sinned, who threw the rocks at the sage, to bring them back to life. So again, we're going to see that the Ganges River is going to be related to Shiva, because if you look at the Mahabarata, it's the son of the Ganges River fights on the side of Karna, fights on the side of the son of the sun god, and on the side of the avatar of Kali, who represents the ego. So that's what we're seeing in the Mahabarata. It's the ego and the sun god. The sun god represents time, and that's going to be versus Krishna, who represents transcendence, oneness consciousness, and Arjuna, who represents ephemerality, who's the son of the sky god. The sky is ephemerality. It's closer to oneness. It's less material. I'm the first person to discover all this that I know of. So then we have the Ganges River is also going to be on that side. It's going to be on the bad side with Karna, the son of the sun god, and with Kali, with the avatar of Kali, who's Duryodhana in the Mahabharata. So they're fighting, and the son of the Ganges River, he's on their side. And the thing about that is the Ganges River, if you think about it, it still is physical. It's still a physical thing, and that's related to the sun. All the people on the bad side are more related to the physical. But the thing about the Ganges River is it represents a capacity for sinners to achieve salvation, because and this is all on the side of Shiva. So the Mahabharata is about Shiva versus Vishnu, Krishna versus Shiva, and Shiva in this war is Ashwathama. I think that's how you say his name, Ashwathama or something. And he's the avatar, and he's fighting on the side of Duryodhana, the Kali, the avatar of Kali, and also Karna, the son of the sun god, and the son of the Ganges River. Now, the son of the Ganges River doesn't really want to fight on their side, but he has to. But the idea behind the Ganges River is even a sinner can achieve salvation by becoming baptized. So that's death to the self, getting baptized in the river, and being reborn. So that's why it's on the side of Shiva. So there's these sun god worshippers in this story, and then this is before the Ganges River came on Earth, and they threw rocks at the sage, and the sage turned them into fire. So then what happens is some of the sun god worshippers, some of their descendants, they pray to the sun god that their descendants be brought back to life. But then they die, and then their descendants keep praying, and then finally they keep praying until finally the Brahma comes down and he says, don't worship the sun god, worship Shiva. So this is moving away from the worship of the sun and the moon and the different material, different aspects of nature. This is the idea of separate consciousness, that there are separate things, and moving towards Shiva, which is oneness consciousness. Shiva and Vishnu are one, but Shiva is more of that aspect of salvation for sinners, of the auspiciousness that even a sinner can be saved. Because again, we don't want to judge anybody, because when you judge somebody, you say, oh, this guy, he actually bad. He's very sinful. He's crazy like Ravana, and he's acting all hyper, and he doesn't seem very righteous. This guy can't be saved. But the idea with Shiva is he does save him, and there is a capacity for such people to be saved. You can, if you have a high level of aliveness, even if you're doing crazy stuff, you can still lose yourself, and it's a losing yourself, which is a salvation. So there's a lot of stories about that. But in this story, the guy's worshiping the sun god, but then Brahma comes down and says, no, don't worship the sun god, worship Shiva, and then your descendants will be brought back to life. So this is that movement away from worshiping the separate elements in nature, and then moving towards Shiva, Vishnu, the movement away from the many gods to the one god. And then we're going to see that in a lot of stories. So even in the Mahabarata, we're going to see with the Ganges River, she has a lot of sons, or the Ganges River has many sons before Bhishma, and she drowns them. But each of the sons represents a different element. But she drowns all the elements. And the drowning of the elements, they used to worship the different elements. But when she drowns them, people look at this interpersonally and they say, oh, this is a scary story. The mother's drowning her children. But if you want to look at it, what it really represents is it represents the movement away from worship of the separate elements to the worship of Krishna, worship of oneness. Let's see. Yeah, so we see that story, but my point too, though, with that story is it was actually Indra in the story with the sun god. It was Indra, the sky god, who brought that horse to the sage, to where the sun god worshippers would throw the rocks at the sage. And that's again this idea of the dialectic between the sun god and the sky god, the god of the clouds. The sun and the clouds are always having a dichotomous relationship. And maybe this represents, the sun god represents that desire for power, and power is important. Power is part of the ego, and power is related to Shiva. Remember, in the Mahabarata, it's the sun god and the Ganesh and Bhima, who's the son of the Ganges River, and Duryodhana, who's the avatar of Kali. They're fighting Krishna and Arjuna, who's the sky god, the god of the clouds, and Bhishma, who's the god of the wind. These are more ephemeral qualities, more transcendental qualities. So it's the physical, the immanent, versus the transcendent in the Mahabarata. I'm the first person to discover all this. So then, so you see that aspect, and then but you're going to see that conflict between the sun god and the sky god, the god of the clouds, throughout the whole scripture. So there's another story about that where Varochana, he's supposed to die, but then he worships the sun. But anyways, back to that story though with the sun god. The whole, what I was saying is the one where the people threw the rock at the sage and the sage turned into fire. It was Indra who catalyzed that whole situation. Indra was the one who brought that horse to the sage to start up that whole conflict. Because again, it's that Indra fighting the sun god. We're seeing the god of the clouds fighting the god of the sun. We don't just see this in Hindu mythology. We see this in Greek mythology too, where we'll see Apollo and Jupiter having contests with their different followers, and we're seeing a conflict even in the Greek scriptures. So the Greek scriptures and the Hindu scriptures very similar dichotomy. But and you're going to even see that in the Iliad. We see the movement away from worshiping the different elements in the Trojan War, where we're having the different element gods like the Jupiter or Zeus, who represents the sky god, and Apollo, the sun god, and we're having them fight each other. And so it's the same dichotomy that we see in the Greek, and we see it also in the Hindu. And it's ultimately about the transcendence of all of them to Vishnu, Shiva, the oneness consciousness. And we see that again in Varochana, the story of Varochana. He's a demon, and the demons again they represent more the immanent, the physical world, but they're worshippers of Shiva. But again, is Shiva bad? No, Shiva's not bad. Shiva represents a flow that's even given to sinners. Because again, you don't want to judge anybody because the rain, according to the Bible, falls on the just and the unjust. So even Varochana, even the demons can be saved, even the bad people, and that's why you don't want to judge anybody, because judging itself is the ego, and that's not salvation. Salvation is transcendence of the ego to the flow, and even a demon can attain the flow. So Varochana is a demon, and the demons are always fighting the gods, and the gods again are the transcendental, like Indra in the sky, Indra who Arjuna was his son in the Mahabharata, and and the Vayu, who's the god of the wind, and the god of the moon. They're all these are all the transcendental gods. But then there's the demons, who there's a demon of death. There's a demon of killing and demon of thievery and stuff. But these are all demons. But Varochana, you see, there's also kind of demons that are kind of good. So one example would be Prahlada means joy. So Prahlada actually ends up worshiping Vishnu. I'm the first person to discover this stuff. But what Prahlada, joy, worshiping Vishnu represents is when you're in joy, you can attain the flow. But joy is not necessarily the flow, but it can help you attain the flow. And Varochana, I think that means brightness or illumination. And through illumination, you can gain the flow. But Varochana is supposed to be killed. But then he's told by his guru, who's Shukracharya, who's the god of who's Venus, who represents the planet Venus. You see, they worship the different gods. All represent different aspects. So Shukracharya is the god of Venus, and then we have Jupiter. That's Brihaspati, and he's the guru of the gods. And we have Mercury is Buddha, who's a different god, and Buddha in the Mahabarata fights on the side of Krishna as well, but he ends up getting killed. You see, all the gods in the Mahabarata, all the sons of the gods end up getting killed because it represents the movement away from worshiping them to worshiping Krishna. And that's why the Mahabarata is all about all these different gods fighting, and it's about all of them dying so we can transcend the worship of them to the worship of the one God. So then we see that even in the Mahabharata, where Ashwatthama, who's the avatar of Shiva, ends up killing the sons of the Pandavas. Who, remember, the Pandavas are the sons of the god of the clouds, the god of the wind, these different gods, and he kills their sons. And one of their sons represents all of the gods of the Vedas. He's the avatar of all of the gods of the Vedas. And the killing of him by Shiva represents the movement from the worship of all the gods of the Vedas to the recognition that there is no gods. Everything is one. Really, it would ultimately point to the quadrant, that all these separate things are actually just the quadrant, the one God. So then we have the movement from. So anyways, I was going back to Varochana. In the story of Varochana is worshiping the sun god because he's supposed to die, and this will give him immortality to worship the sun god. And then the sun god comes down and he gives him a hat, and he says, "Now you will be immortal." Remember, the worship of the sun god is about power. And the sun god's related to Shiva. Remember, in the Mahabharata, the son of the sun god fights with Kali, who is the god of the ego, and they're on the side of Shiva, Ashwatthama, who are fighting Krishna and all of them. Right? But who's good or bad? The thing is, even the ego is necessary. Even people who are crazy can still attain the flow. You don't want to judge. And all of them end up being killed and stuff. Actually, Ashwatthama is not killed, and neither is Krishna. Because that's the oneness, that's the flow that you ultimately want to get to. But Varochana, he's worshiping the sun god. But then Indra comes down and takes the hat that gives him immortality and kills him. So again, we're seeing the conflict between the sun god and the cloud god. The sun god's a desire for power, and the cloud god Indra, he's more of a conservative force because you don't want to go too. It's like staring at the sun for too long. You're going to go blind. If you're trying to get power too fast, too much knowledge too quick, you go crazy. And Indra is kind of that conservative force that's keeping you from too much brightness, too much sunlight. But also the sun brings appearances, which is an illusion. So it's all paradoxes. But I could keep going and going about the scriptures, but I think I gave you a general idea of some of the complexities within the Hindu scriptures.